Good morning, almost good afternoon. I think as a strategist, when I prepared for this presentation, I thought, last person before lunch. So my presentation hopefully will entertain you as well as inform you. I've included many animations and twirlies of text to excite your senses. So my name is Chéla Breckon, and I've been working as the project manager of Renfrew Lanark Local Immigration Partnership for just over 5.5 years now, to the great pleasure of my background and real passion for community development through the valuation of diversity. And so today I want to give you a little bit of insight on how we approached a deficit of municipal involvement and how we are looking to change that into the future and where we're at now in terms of that discovery. But firstly, a little bit of context is required. We heard from David earlier today where he talked about how different the regions of LIP are. And if anyone's unfamiliar with Renfrew Lanark, this is the area that borders, the rural areas that border Ottawa. So we're not far from here, about 45 minutes drive to my first community and 2.5 hours driving to my furthest. This composes 10,000 square kilometers of geography. It means I have an incredibly huge travel budget and high mileage on my car. Within that territory, we have 26 municipalities. 2 of those are separated from the counties in which they are located in, and one of those separated municipalities has their own local immigration partnership in Smiths Falls. We have 2 counties making up Renfrew County and Lanark County, 1 First Nation community, the Algonquins of Pugwacknagon in Renfrew County, and among those 26 municipalities, there are 160. That's right, 160 elected officials that are representing 160,000 people. So this is something I call cooks in the kitchen, and we all know that saying. So sometimes it becomes a challenge to work in a region where tiny neighborhoods, rural zones are each fighting for their own agenda at a 1,000-to-1 ratio. So very interesting perspective to take. And to sort of build on this slide a little bit, just to provide some further context about the region that I serve, what we discovered early on in the assessment process is that there were a very low number of municipal leaders, provincial leaders, and members of federal parliament locally that knew and understood about the changing demographics in our country, and certainly the emerging labor trends that are bound to arrive, especially acutely in rural zones. So we took on the challenge of basically assessing why there was low participation on the federal, provincial, and municipal level with immigration, attraction, preparedness, welcoming communities. Any of those sectors were misrepresented, or underrepresented, I should say. And we had a consultation with some of our leadership, the elected from provincial and federal representation, and the answer we got was, we aren't going to focus on this until you can prove that the constituents want it. So there was tackle strategy number 1, was proving that there was an appetite for this work in Renfrew Lanark, but that eventually we could develop a salivation and to articulate that and to promote it. And eventually, through a representation of municipal leaders that are champions to the work, to showcase to our provincial and federal government that the constituents do care through the representation of these municipal elect. So on the committee, with our local immigration steering committees, we have 1 representing each county, particularly because they are so different. Lanark County is highly bedroom community. Renfrew County is incredibly rural. The average distance between communities is 30 kilometers, and none of these communities are greater than 15,000 in number. So we have 1 municipality that actively sits on the steering committee of the 26, and that was easily won, but further participation has been incredibly difficult to achieve a partner establishment among those municipalities. And we have another municipality that's not a member, but is an active participant in terms of co-writing grants with us and basically producing cultural events and things to support their welcoming community. So we do have involvement on some levels, but ultimately low in terms of awareness, advice on the board, and also action on the floor. So because we knew, also, did I mention we don't have settlement services? So when I first started this project, I called about 15 different project managers in the spring of 2011 to get some best practices and advice as a newcomer to this scene. And there was dead silence over the phone when I asked the question, where do we start? And they said, well, your settlement agency. I said, well, I've been Googling that for a couple of days and a couple of calls out to my network, and we definitely do not have these services here. And I was new to the area as well, so I wasn't aware of this until I researched it. But there weren't any settlement services. In Lanark County, we are served by the office in Brockville through a part-time individual who comes on a purely referral basis. So this is the extent of settlement services locally. Then we looked at, furthermore, the low participation in leadership in terms of embedding this work into their strategic plans, action, policy, pretty much non-existent. And we realized that LIP was the only mechanism to really bring this topic to light. And that was truly what got the conversation started at the advisory table and focused on a strategic direction to build that. So through the two most important things that we wanted to have emerge from this effort was not only a sustainable effort in terms of leadership coming from the municipality. So I'll note we are not housed by a municipality as well. We're housed by Algonquin College, which is a very unique contribution agreement holder for LIPs. Not too many others are housed by educational institutions. But we knew that if municipalities could get involved and really represent leadership in this department, that ultimately the sustainability of the work would be long-term and potentially past the life cycle of LIP. And we also knew that the long-term impact possible through that sustainable partner or leader would really result in generational change, and that's always how I'm thinking in my background in strategy. We think 50 years ahead rather than, the term of our funding agreement, which was mentioned before as a barrier. But we also knew that our local communities needed to become or demonstrate their welcoming attributes. And in order for municipalities to plan for attractiveness and retention in areas where there's less than 6% new Canadians living, currently, no services, nothing formally going on to support that intake. We knew that without that welcoming communities base, we wouldn't be able to retain anyone we attracted. So that was primary. And then ultimately, that municipalities could act as a local service agency to newcomers. What could they offer in terms of their own pre-existing services, what they are already doing in their communities in terms of recreation, facilities, any really participation whatsoever, and how can we make that welcoming to serve the new Canadian population, and how do we make sure that those folks know about those things and that they can participate and hopefully shoot for integration. So as these sort of needs and the best sort of rationale to approach this huge real sell at the municipal level was we needed to figure out a really good strategy. And so I have always taken the approach at our LIP table that we are a living document. So there are our core partners that remain and have remained since 2011, but as our strategies shape and evolve, we bring in new members that are experts in this particular area, that we have we've tried to investigate that strategy, or we're trying to execute the action or the tactical components of the strategy. So first of all, we stacked the deck with municipal advisors, people, CAOs, mayors, councillors, deputy mayors, people that were already on my radar in terms of who were champions and who could provide us with insight about really what is the municipal agenda What is the way to sell this kind of work to the audience of the elected? And how are we going to make sure that we play to the tough questions? And so that was really a huge advantage. We also knew that in order to sell the concept of improving policy and strategy in this area, we had to look at their existing strategic plans, if they even had one. We had to look at what their economic development committees were already doing and find synergies and find islands where we could all be deserted together. And that was sort of something that we looked at right away. But then in order to sort of build on that momentum, we knew we needed good data. We needed some real research that could back up any of the arguments that we were trying to make. And so conveniently, we were able to meet up with a pilot project called Big Data for Small Places. And this data pilot project was designed to provide capacity in small to medium enterprise or SPOs, or generally people that don't have the money or time to support data analytics. And they were able to train us on how to access good data sets and look at partners to acquire that information and how to break it down to sell or to reinforce your business case. So we did that, and through that, we were able to really connect with some very interesting data sets that helped to prove our point at the municipal level. So one of the big tools, I'm sure you know, I've participated in the review of this data set once before, and it's called the Community Attractiveness Indicators for Newcomers and Youth, which is produced by OMAFRA, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. This has been amended over the years, and I participated in the sort of characteristic development of indicators there, so I had a good familiarity there. We also hugely use the P2P website. And in fact, Ottawa LIP has an excellent video on there about how they were able to translate their mayor's commitment to be a champion for the work. And in fact, it helped coin the name of our presentation, which is The Worth of Our Welcome. And in studies by Ocassi talking about what really was the value that newcomers were achieving through settlement services and why and what they really wanted. And all of those sort of research points that I took on myself really developed into the rationale to these points. So we started with research, and then we moved on to planning workshops with the advisors. And I used huge Post-it notes on the walls, and we talked about the main themes that emerged from the research, and then we plucked from there ones that would speak to the municipal agenda. And from there, we developed our message. And this is what I call Delegation Nation. So I went on a one-year road tour to all 26 municipalities and presented a 10-minute, hugely pointed presentation about what they could be doing and what the stats are in their population, labor market changes, all these things. So here's an example from Madawaska Valley, just showing some stats here and then 10 years ahead. And you can see the senior citizen population doubling, the working age group shrinking. We all know these things, but these were news stories to the municipal leaders that I spoke to. And through some sort of statistical manipulation and using our partner at the workforce planning body, we were able to sort of determine how many workers would be short for how many jobs that would be available based on participation rates. So these communities got some pretty hard numbers presented to them. We also presented this information in terms of contribution to the greater federal system, how many seniors are claiming on the system and how many people are contributing to it in your community. And some scary numbers like this would come up, where we're projecting in Canada by 2036 it's 2-to-1. Communities in my area are already at 1-to-1 and soon to be very close to a handful of seniors per worker. So here's a great little chart that really spoke to the labor deficit. I'm sure you've seen this before. This is from the minor report about jobs without people, people without jobs. And it really just articulates the same argument we were making. So then we tried to build the evidence that we all know to be true as experts in this field, is why are newcomers the solution to this population and labor problem? In terms of labor supply, innovation, entrepreneurship, social fabric. We laid out all those arguments in terms of dollars and cents. What would the municipality financially benefit through this? But one of the biggest things was knowing how to tackle the tough questions, and here's a couple examples of what we talked about and what the answers I had to be prepared for. And ultimately, we were able to capture almost every delegation was covered in the news. And here's a really great quote from a counselor. She said that she'd heard concerns that immigrants would be taking our jobs from people who are here, but after my presentation, I see the full picture. So we were able to bust these myths and get them to understand the realities of all of this. Here's a couple more quotes, and this is very close to the end of my chat here. So we need people who are going to build, the people who are going to work. We need qualified people. Talking about that these facts are alarming. This was news to most of the municipal councillors we spoke to. I am seeing emptier classrooms. When immigrants arrive, they are immediate consumers. These kind of press coverage really presented this sort of light bulb moment for us. And now that we have collected all of these presentations and the interest from the groups, now we're starting to initiate mini meetings where we go in and we try to advise on how they can immediately start with welcoming communities. And eventually we hope to form a council of champions within each county, with the greater goal of 3 years down the road of having formal committees set up at the county level that will advise on settlement and attractiveness for those represented communities. And that's where we hope to head long term. Thank you.